So something like 10 years ago, Barrie had an existential crisis related to selenium. This crisis resulted in a number of stressful meetings in Scott Newsmore's office about the meaning of life and our role in the world as scientists. And the net result of this existential crisis is the work that Barrie's about to present to you today.
Oh, that's all true. Yeah. All right. Am I ready to go?
Yeah, you're good. That's it.
Okay, that's it. Best introduction I've ever had. Okay, so I'm gonna shut this down. And I think this should work. Okay, people, tell me what happened. Do you see the title screen and not the weird slide preview view?
Yeah, it looks fine.
Okay, all right, awesome. What I want to do today is tell you a story, and I think Luke introduced it perfectly. I want to tell you a story of this sort of notion of polymorphic games from my perspective, and how it came to be, and what we thought we were trying to do at the beginning, and whether or not we did that. And I would like to begin this story. Let's see here. Here it is. Yeah. So on the right is a picture of teenage Barrie. I know it's horrifying. I won't leave this up too terribly long, but it's important. I was a super big nerd when I was a teenager, and one of the facets of my nerdiness was video games. Ever since they came out in the 70s with Space Invaders and other things, so many quarters pumped into video games and things like that. Anyway, as you imagine, this combination of nerdy habits and looking like this, I was a super big hit with the ladies. Actually, that's not true. And in fact, I want to take just a little side trip here before we really dive into what this means in terms of super nerdy teenage Barrie, and you know what you're about to hear about in terms of this existential crisis and video games and stuff. So I just want to divert just slightly to question the sanity of my wife, because I want you to look at this picture, and approximately the same time period, that's what she looked like. I mean, I don't understand what she was thinking. And anyway, I clearly got lucky and stuff like that. But I was scanning old pictures this weekend, and I found this one. I was like, what in the hell are you thinking? You're stupid. At any rate, here's the beginning of the existential crisis. So when I came to the University of Idaho, really one of my main research foci was the concept of convergent evolution during domestication, and I used zebrafish to study this. And what I'm trying to show you here is the idea like there's a ground squirrel at the evolution meetings who's wanting to eat out of my hand. And then there's a domesticated zebrafish that Mary Oswald imposed a bunch of selection on that do have a similar set of behaviors if you classify them in a certain way. And at the time I was really interested in the kind of the genomic basis of that, and you know, how did those behaviors evolve, and what genes were under selection, and all of those kinds of things. And one of the horrifying truths that was revealed to me during this period, and that's actually early on, was when I brought Greg Gibson, who authored this series of books on genomics, in for a seminar, and he said, look, it doesn't matter, we have all these awesome tools, and you're going to do all this genomic stuff, but it still comes down to one gene, one PhD. You still have to burn a PhD student to figure out what your gene of choice does in terms of this, the underpinnings of adaptive evolution. And I began to become not very enthused about this particular aspect of my research. And this is where the selenium comes in, because, for example, one of the genes that we feel we had evidence was associated with all of those domestication behaviors was selenoprotein P. And Maya Benner did a whole PhD on that. And we had no, like, what is that gene? Nobody even had even heard of it and stuff. And so I was indeed in this existential crisis of like, is my research worth anything? I don't really know. Like, do I still want to do this? And at the same time, I was beating myself up about my research program. I was beating myself up about what I was doing in the classroom, and I was reading books like this one, Minds on Fire, where I was like, what am I doing? I'm standing in front of these students, and I look at them, and then these are things, if you look at these quotes, these are things that, although we don't say these exact words, we, as faculty members, we sometimes say this stuff. It's like, why? All these students are they're sitting there, and I'm not getting through, this should be exciting, and they don't look excited. They're on their cell phones and they're doing all sorts of stuff. And in fact, these are a couple of quotes that I feel like are really applicable today in terms of, modern students, right? Instead of being thrilled by the eager search for truth, our classes too often sit listless on the bench. It is not because the lecturer is dull, sure it's not, but because the pupils do not prize the end enough to relish the drudgery required for skill in any great pursuit. Or there's another person, I do as little as I can for these dunderheads and save time for my research. And is it because of, the millennials these days that sit in our classroom? And I would say no, because these quotes are from the early 1900s. It's always the same. We get old, we lose the connection with the students and stuff like that. So anyway, back to Nerdy Barrie and video games. Right around 2015, actually, is when all of this existential crisis kind of thinking was in play. And it's interesting you mentioned Scott in my office, because Scott, at one point, right around 2015, I was talking with Larry about potentially getting involved in administration and becoming the associate director of IBEST. And Scott came into my office and he drew me this lovely graph where he's like, here's how this is going to work. Here's 2015 and here's your graph of career satisfaction. And you're at a bifurcation point and you can choose research happiness or admin doom. And then sometime, probably right around now, die of a stroke. And I come back to this picture. I think he was wrong, actually. I really enjoy what I'm doing right now. So, but I was really sort of trying to figure out how do I want to spend my time and how can I do the most good, And anyway, so, Nerdy Barrie turned into suit wearing admin Barrie. But the reality is, even then, I played a shitload of video games. Like, these are some of my recent favorites, but I've played so many video games, and I still do. I still play many of these. And, it's a thing that I love. And I got thinking during this dark time, wait a minute, could you make an evolutionary game? Could evolution, like an actual model of biological evolution, work as a game mechanic? I think that would be really fun. And I briefly entertained the idea of teaching myself how to code and make video games, and then realized, well, that's just not happening. But fortunately, there are other people. Gamer, Scott's texting me. Newsmer. I didn't even think you were on here. There are other people on campus who know how to do this, and one of them is this guy, Terry. This is a Hearthstone card that one of our students made for him. He looks ridiculous, not like me. I look amazing. But anyway, I eventually went down and I chatted with Terry, and we started collaborating on basic concepts, and he made these cool prototypes. But eventually we decided to teach a class together. Well, video games and evolution, where we'd have half CS students, half biology students. And the notion was, and I want to highlight this because this is the actual framing for this entire talk. The notion was that with a combination of computer science and biology, we were going to collaborate to create a fun and engaging video game that people of all ages want to play, an educational experience that will teach the principles of biological evolution, and an accurate and rigorous simulation that can be used for research. That's what we were thinking when we decided to embark on this grand adventure. And that's really how I've decided I want to test this hypothesis. Did we do that, Terry? Anyway, I want to show you also after this course, that was our aspiration. And this is what we did. This festering pile of like we made it in processing, and it's not fun or engaging or educational or accurate or rigorous. But you got to start somewhere, right? So this was called Evolve TD, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but let's come back to this concept of this is what we sought to do. That is what we were thinking. We didn't do it in the class because we learned a lot of stuff. But really how I want to set up this talk is I want to just break that kind of statement down and really look at what have we done over the last 5 years. And so if we just take this core notion of evolutionary video games are fun and educational, I want to ask these questions. Did we actually make any video games? Did our games include and properly represent models of biological evolution? Did including evolution make the games more fun? And did people learn anything by playing them? And so that's the structure for the rest of this talk. And one of the things we learned right away, Terry and I, is that computer science plus biology does not make an evolutionary video game at all. And what you need is a really wide set of skills, a broad set of interdisciplinary skills to do this properly. Evolutionary biology and programming, of course, but design, art, music, writing, all of these kinds of things. And what we discovered is this university is really, really open to these crazy ideas. And we went around to all these different faculty members listed here, and not one of them turned us away. They helped us connect with their students and recruit people. And we wrote, all of these people wrote a VIP grant proposal together that got funded, that started our early work along with Beacon. And off we went. And that was really kind of a cool moment, I thought, was nobody sort of looked at us and was like, but video game, get out of here. I'm too important to talk to you about this. And these are, I mean, some of these people are like university distinguished professors and stuff. They're not trivial gets in terms of collaborators. So at any rate, let's just start breaking this notion down. I use red to sort of focus on what I'm actually talking about. Let's start with the concept of making a video game. Not an easy thing to do. And I'm going to spare you the guts of what we did in our development model and all of those kinds of things, because I feel like I got too much stuff to talk about and not enough time. Did we actually make any video games? And my criteria for checking that box and saying, yeah, we did, is did we publish any video games and sell them on the open market, right? And so I'm going to show you what we did in that regard. So here's our Steam page for those of you that are not nerds. Steam is like, think of it like a large digital distribution warehouse like Amazon.com, but for video games. And if you are selling video games, you're on Steam. And here's our Steam page from quite a while ago for Darwin's Demons, which I'll describe in a minute. It was our first game. I think it was originally Terry's idea to make essentially evolutionary space invaders. And we released it on Darwin Day. Darwin's birthday is February 12th. We released this the day after because that was a Monday in 2017. And it was made by students, one of whom was Landon. And I'll show you here a video of what that looks like, although it's not really news to most of you, I don't think. So this is Terry and I doing this sort of trailer. I don't know. Let me know if you can't hear the audio. And I'm gonna.
Hi, I'm Barrie Robison, professor of biological sciences at the University.
Look at this.
And I'm Terry Soule, a professor of computer
science. This was pre-COVID. We looked so happy.
We're the founders of Polymorphic Games, a University of Idaho-based game design studio that creates games that are based on the principles of evolutionary science.
We're here to introduce
the science. Are not very exciting. The basic idea, though, is those are the aliens. They have digital genomes. Shoot at them. The ones that get down the screen or shoot you get more fitness and have more babies. Pass their traits along to their offspring.
All of their traits, how they behave.
The game gets really hard.
The process includes a mutation.
Let's get through this.
If you play for long enough,
one of the really
things that we've
and then
noticed
you evolve crazy stuff like this, where eventually they evolve to like shoot a lot and really have different player types.
One of the really nice features of tutorials
that was released on Steam. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to let that ride, Terry. You're looking really good. So that was Darwin's Demons. We released it on Steam. We'll get to the sort of selling it and all of that kind of stuff in a bit. And the second one that we made was called Project Castor, which was a much more ambitious project. We released it in 2019, an evolutionary tower defense game. And in this case, you're battling, it's like 3D aliens and stuff like that, that all have the same structure of a digital genome. So this is Landon's creation. And when you mutate the values of that vector of numbers that make up their genome, it is converted in the game engine to all of these bizarre, weird morphologies that you see right now. And those traits that you're seeing are what they use to navigate the environment and try to eat your base and destroy your stuff. So both of those games were made by undergraduates. They were funded by a combination of Beacon, an internal VIP grant from the University of Idaho, and iGEM grants from the State Board of Education. And they were both published and made commercially, made for sale on Steam. And so we did it. We hired a bunch of undergrads and we made some video games. So check mark, yay, that's pretty cool. And not a trivial accomplishment. Making video games is not easy. It's a lot of hard work. The next part, which is the bulk of the talk though, is me trying to convince you that they're evolutionary video games, that they actually contain models of evolution. So let's have a look at that. In Darwin's Demons, and this is actually true of Project Castor as well, what we used is a quantitative trait model of evolution, where the genes were essentially modeled as, I'll get dorky here for a few people, freely recombining quantitative trait loci with additive effects. So each gene, the number value in that genome represented in some way, or it was scaled to represent the additive effect of that gene on a particular trait. And so we weren't modeling A's and T's and G's and C's. It was a quantitative trait model of evolution. And all of the traits were defined by genes or linear combinations of genes. And then we imposed variation in the population using an extraordinarily high mutation rate, because otherwise the games take way, way too long to actually play. Every organism was sexually reproducing, it was a diploid, and we didn't really have males and females. They were hermaphrodites. The traits in this game were how they moved, what kind of projectile they shot, what kind of shield they had, how fast the projectiles were, and so forth. And in terms of data from Darwin's Demons, I'm just going to show you this one thing that we actually have as a splash screen in the game. And it just shows you that we have several different fitness components in the game. We have accuracy, how good they are at shooting you, how far they get down the screen, and how long they live. Those are each called accuracy, aggression, and lifespan. And this is just a simple experiment with 3 different replicates using each of the fitness components, with drift being where they're all turned off. And I'm showing you the fire rate genetic value. And what it shows you is when we select on how good they are at shooting you, the fire rate genetic value goes way up. There's very strong selection for increased fire rate. That's, they just shoot lots of stuff. And then when we have that turned off and the other fitness functions turned on, generally that gene doesn't evolve. So, and that's how you get this evolution of a bullet hell. The bulk of what I want to do to convince you that our games are using evolutionary models, though, involves Project Castor. And this is where Luke comes back in, and why I wanted him to introduce me, if not him, then Scott. This is a picture from actually 3 years ago today, Luke, when we went to the Judas Priest concert. That was really awesome. So I think we learned a lot about each other, and it was really great. Best band in the world, everybody knows that. There you go. And I like, I'm working with Luke and Kristen and stuff. And the thing I like about Luke is that he's a genius. And sometimes he tells me why I do things before I know why I did the thing. And in this case, I was running a lot of experiments with our video games, but I really didn't have a clear understanding of why I was doing that. And I stole this out of a paper he's currently editing that we're working on about Project Castor, where I was like, I don't care. I mean, it's fun to make a video game and test whether it's evolutionary. And he's pointed out to me, it's like, you know, what's neat is that this isn't just a simulation where you encode and predispose the result because you encode the fitness function in a straight up simulation. In this case, the form of natural selection depends on the interactions of all of the enemies and the player and things like that. And it's sort of a different kind of a simulation in terms of studying evolution and things like that. So we're working on that right now. Also, this was the same day this time 3 years ago, where Scott gave the keynote at Evo Weibo, and we had to wear shirts that said, Scott Neusmer is smarter than me and made me wear Comic Sans. So I can't remember why. I think Luke lost a bet, and then I wanted a shirt anyway. So at any rate, the basic concept in Project Castor is you've got a base. It is down here in the bottom middle of the screen, and that thing you can't see anymore. The aliens are rushing to attack you. You place various defensive structures that have various properties to prevent the aliens from attacking your base. The aliens get fitness when they damage your towers, damage your base, or get close to your base. And so I summarized that here. So if the fitness is sort of an additive function of those kind of facets in the game. How do they accomplish those things? How do they damage your base or get close to it and all of that kind of stuff? Well, they have traits. And here's a list of some examples of those traits for Project Castor. How big they are, how much health they have, how fast they go, how far they can sense the environment, what preferences they have for what to do, their behaviors, their resistances, agility, all of those kinds of things. Oh, and also, by the way, they sometimes eat people and reproduce asexually and make lots of babies. So I'll show you that in a second. That's like a hidden fitness function. That is sort of a fun thing. So by the way, all the civilians in Project Castor are modeled after the developers and Terry and I, plus we put people like, I think Jack Sullivan's in there and Eric Goodman's in there. But anyway, this is what I'm talking about in terms of hidden fitness functions. Aliens can acting a human and plant. The smaller they are, the more babies they can make through asexual parasitism type thing. If we look at Project Castor and we just say, okay, so what happens when you set up a bunch of defenses and turn these creatures loose? What happens? And the first thing that we would do when we make these things is we have these fitness functions, but then I tell the students, okay, turn them off. Because what we should see is this is the gene, this is the gene that control, actually this is actual body size measured in the game engine in 3 distinct replicates of Project Castor, and where we turned off all the fitness functions. Because what we would expect to see there, if this was an actual evolutionary model, is just genetic drift. Every dot here is an alien. The x-axis is the generation. The y-axis is body size with 0. It's like a genetic value. And so 0 is their starting point for body size. The dots are colored based on health. So the redder they are, the more health they have. The size of the circle is how many babies that individual had as well. So, and there's really not much going on. You just let it go, and you can see the variance increases, and that's largely because we're imposing mutation in every generation. The mutation effect sizes and mutation rate are very high. When we turn on the fitness functions, though, this is what happens. And this, again, I'm just showing you 3 replicates. And now the bottom row of graphs is the same thing you were just looking at, and the top row of graphs is when the fitness functions were turned on. And you can see there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And in fact, it looks like these populations might each be under disruptive selection, where there's potentially 2 peaks in the fitness landscape. One where body size, it's better to have large body size, and one where it's better to have small body size. therein lies one of the problems with analyzing some of these video game data. Let's zoom in on one of those replicates, shall we? And I'll show you what actually is going on when we just turn this loose with all of these fitness functions and traits. We're just looking at a single replicate here, and I think this is the same kind of thing, that the trait is body size, and health is the color, and the number of offspring is the size. But what we did is we went to the end of the experiment, and we took all 200 individuals that are at the end of this experiment in the terminal generation. And we were like, okay, well, are there two groups, and how would we describe those two groups? And we described them in terms of their traits, which on the heat map is on the x-axis, how fast they go, how big they are, how much health they have, what preferences do they have, and the individuals are rows in the heat map. And you can see there's two general groups, and those general groups are generally defined by what we would call in video game parlance tanks. Big, slow, lots of health, can suck up lots of damage, and they just lumber towards your towers and destroy all your defenses. And they prefer towers. Their preference gene is that. And then what we would call high DPS, sort of hunter-killer creatures. They prefer civilians. They evolve very large sight radius, so they can just see where the civilians are in the map. They run. They're very fast. They are agile because the civilians run away, and they eat the civilians. And so they're, even within one replicate, we end up with two general types of aliens in this simulation. So that's interesting and challenging in terms of running experiments that describe how the model actually works. So I'm seeing like red stuff here, which means somebody's doing chat things. Should I look at the chat? No, it's just stuff. I'll look at it later. So the cool thing about all the games we make is they have experiment modes where you can go in and adjust the parameters of the evolutionary model and run experiments and replicates and stuff like that. And so this is a screenshot of experiment mode in Project Castor. I'm trying to keep track of the time too. And so we ran a lot of experiments with the goal of publishing a paper. Me and there were several undergrads that were helping me run these experiments to sort of test, like let's try to publish our evidence that this is an evolutionary video game. And so to do that, we thought, well, let's sort of test some kind of predictions of, if it's an evolutionary video game, then these are the kinds of things we would expect to see. If the fitness functions are on, we should get repeatable patterns of adaptive evolution. And when they're off, we should see essentially results consistent with drift. And we wanted to ask, like, if we use different kinds of towers, if it's an evolutionary game, those different kinds of defenses should drive different kinds of adaptive strategies. And then if the player uses different strategies or even the same strategy, we wanted to test whether the players had any effect at all, different players, on the evolutionary patterns that we observed. So we did this giant experiment, like 250 replicates, where the population size in each generation was 200 aliens. We ran it for 50 generations for each replicate across a bunch of different experimental conditions, 3 different players, crossed with 3 different strategies, crossed with 2 different tower types, crossed with 4 different fitness conditions. This is before Luke got a hold of me and said, "You're stupid. Simple is better. Why are you making this so complicated?" And I'm like, "No, 8-way interactions. That's how you get papers published, right?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Oh." I learned a lot. Anyway, it's good. But I've got this giant data set of about 3 million dead aliens. And I just want to show you some of the results that are coming out of it. First, we wanted to know, okay, what kinds of aliens resulted across the entire experiment at the end of all of these replicates. So we used model-based clustering to sort of phenotypically cluster what kinds of aliens we ended up observing in terms of trait space. And in this case, the punchline is 16 different kinds of aliens, phenotypic clusters using model-based clustering. And I'll show you a better description of what those look like. And we grouped them into generally 4 general categories with variations in between. This reminds me of Luke's, he gave a talk once and he said something like, everybody asks, like evolution's the same, but also kind of different or something. And that's what we see here as well. Repeatable general patterns with different sub-flavors within each of them. So 16 different types in terms of trait space. If you look at them in terms of an unrooted cluster of trait space, there's 4 general types. The blue are, that contains the starting values within the experiment as well. Those are ones that didn't evolve much. And so there's really little change from where they started. The orangish ones tend to evolve different movement strategies related to jumping and swimming around or through or over obstacles. Greens were really small, fast. They preferred different things, sometimes civilians, sometimes towers, but, and then the big, there are 5 different flavors of big tanky aliens with lots and lots and lots of health. So, but again, subtypes within each major kind. One of the take-home messages was far and away the most common observation in any one replicate was that we ended up with more than one type at the end of that run. We rarely got replicates where there were only one or two types of aliens in the end product, and there were usually more when fitness functions were turned off, but not necessarily all the time. So that means analyzing these data can be kind of tricky, because if you look at what's the pattern of this trait over time, you might have disruptive selection making it such that you have 2 separate populations of individuals that have really different values of a given trait. Exhibit A. So this is 9 replicates with one particular condition, and this is the end. This is the 200 aliens at the end, 50 generations of selection. I'm just showing you bivariate plots of 2 sets of variables. And on the left is turn rate versus acceleration, and I've colored these data points based on the types of aliens that we observed with model-based clustering, and you can see even with, this is just 9 replicates of the exact same conditions, same player, same fitness conditions, same strategy, everything. And you can see we get some commonalities in the results, but diversity of the results. And that's true even within replicates. And so there are several replicates you can see here where there are actually 2 different kinds or even 3 different kinds of aliens resulting from this particular strategy. So this one would be a good example here. You get fast aliens or aliens that do a lot of damage, kind of thing. So I just wanted to show a few of the results in terms of how these kinds of aliens end up evolving over the course of some of our experimental conditions. This is the case where we were looking at whether when you turn off the fitness functions, what happens versus when they're on. In this case, we had a particular kind of gun called an autocannon. And the main point is here, when fitness functions are on, the sort of right-hand 2 graphs here, when fitness functions are on, we tended to get, with the autocannon, these big tanky aliens with lots of hit points that liked to go eat the towers. When you turn fitness functions off, most of the results were clustering with the starting value, right? So that's the gap here, because at 50 generations, nobody actually had the starting value. With occasionally, we get these smaller individuals, and their frequency was higher when we had civilians on, but no fitness functions. So when you actually ask, okay, are these patterns emerging because of selection happening on traits by analyzing whether certain traits covaried with fitness over the course of the experiment? Again, not easy to do because our population size within a replicate tends to be pretty small. 200 individuals in an evolutionary analysis isn't really great. It's very, but if you do it across all the replicates, and what I'm showing you is like, what is the sort of within all of the replicates under these conditions, the red ones are significantly different from 0 in terms of the beta, the fitness coefficient, essentially the slope of like the relationship between a trait, in this case body size, and fitness. You can see that on average, when the fitness functions are on, in this case, there's positive directional selection because beta is positive on average for increased body size, and that the dynamics of that change over the course of the experiment. And that's true whether civilians are present down here or not present down here. And then when you turn off all the fitness functions, you see, I mean, on average, beta is 0, and you do see the occasional, about the number of false positive fitness estimates that you would have expected when you're just doing rudimentary statistics. So, I mean, we're seeing evolution in trait space, and we think, based on these kinds of analysis, it's because of natural selection. We've also done lots of experiments where we're like, okay, so do different guns cause different outcomes? And they do. I mean, 2 different kinds of guns. This is an autocannon that I can't remember. This like just has some sort of mathematical hit probability where this thing fires an actual projectile that has to go through game space, and you know, it may or may not hit. And generally, when you have an autocannon, you get big creatures. When you have this kind of slower moving projectile, you get small, fast creatures that like to hunt down people or towers, especially when you have civilians. So again, more evidence that the features of the game environment cause different evolutionary outcomes. This is selection on body size when you're using the chip shredders, and I just wanted to show you this because in this case, the selection is negative, so it's for smaller body size, not larger, although it's much less pronounced than in the previous example. So I hope that, I mean, that's like a small little slice of the data that we're working with, but I hope I've at least made you think that it's plausible that our games actually are evolutionary games, and they represent that we're implementing models of biological evolution. So the next bit is quite a bit faster, and I should be done on time. I think I'm trying to monitor how I'm doing here. We want to ask, okay, so evolutionary video games are fun and educational. Well, we made video games and they have evolution in them. Yay, I'm really proud of that. Did that make them more fun? Were they good? This is not easy to answer. So that's what I want to show you here. And how do I collect evidence for this? I have no idea. So did including evolution make the games more fun or interesting or compelling? So one of the concepts that we talk about in the game studio a little bit was kind of first pioneered by Atari, and I think Blizzard uses this concept of you want a game that's easy to learn so people can pick it up really quickly, but difficult to master so they're compelled to keep trying. Like, so chess, there you go. That conforms to this kind of a philosophy. Angry Birds, right? Easy to learn, difficult to master. So, and we argued, well, maybe evolution, has that component because, there it is. It's like Space Invaders, just go across the game, but the bottom of the screen and shoot aliens, but they're adapting to how you play. And that should make it easy to learn, but difficult to master, we claim without evidence. The other thing I'll say is the concept of evolution has been used to sell video games since video games were a thing, really. And so there is the idea of an evolutionary video game, or the concept of evolution, that's used for marketing. So this is an old game from 1982 that you could play on the Apple IIe. That was really fun. It was called Evolution, but all it really was 4 game levels from 4 different parts of the tree of life. Like you were a microbe, you were a monkey, you were a person shooting aliens, that kind of thing. Lots of games that have absolutely nothing to do with evolution put evolution in their title because of the sort of the notion of evolution meaning progressive improvement, which we all know is like, oh, wait, it's not exactly right. And then there are games that profess to be about biological evolution, but aren't even close. They're really not good at that. Plague, Pokemon, Spore, Evolve, there are many others. Okay, I like, you guys have seen this before, many of you have, where I like to put these on a graph. The y-axis is, if you're at the bottom of the y-axis, you suck as a game or as an entertainment product, and if you're at the top of the y-axis, you're like, this is awesome, right? And at the left, you're really reinforcing misconceptions about how evolution works, and on the far right, you are really representing the sort of fully modern, accurate representation of how we think evolution works as of today, right? And you put most of the, so there's Origin of Species. I like to put, that's, I'm not going to go ahead and say that's like a riveting read, but it's obviously, far on the right. And then the creationist agenda stuff is in the lower left quadrant of just like, anyway, whatever. So most of those games, at best, are neutral in terms of evolution stuff, but most of them actually reinforce misconceptions about evolution being like progressive, or they conflate it with development, or they give the player agency, and it actually reinforces intelligent design. And so what we want is to make games that are in that top right quadrant. They're fun and they're representative of at least some facet of evolutionary biology. But did we? I don't know. So I got to let Landon give me the most recent numbers. One thing we could do is we could look at sales and reviews, I guess. So Darwin's Demons, we made it free a while ago, and so that's like 11,000 people have downloaded that on Steam. There's 35 reviews, 88% of which were positive. Project Haster, we've sold for $5, 578 copies of that. There's 11 reviews, 10 of the 11 are positive. But like, is it evolution that's making it? I don't know how to tell you, or how to say whether or not evolution makes the game more fun. So if I'm feeling generous, I feel like we kind of made it into that quadrant, but where exactly? Nobody's going to play these games instead of Skyrim or Hearthstone, or for that matter, Pokemon, Spore, or any of these other games. We're not going to outcompete AAA game studio games and Minecraft and things like that. But if we outcompete textbooks, maybe we're doing some good. So I put a question mark here. I don't know the answer to this. And in fact, the answer to this is going to vary across the people that engage with what we do. Okay, last bit. We profess that evolutionary video games are fun and educational, and people can learn something by playing. Again, not a ton of direct evidence, but I do want to make a few points here. Did people learn anything useful by playing our games? This is a fun anecdote. When we were testing Darwin's Demons, we went to Vandal Overnight. We had a bunch of people test it, and we had a contest where we were giving away as prizes in the high score competition, like gaming mice and $100 things, right? That I bought with my own money, by the way, financial people. And anecdotally, what we observed is there were people that ultimately won the high score competition, one of whom I think was one of James Foster's sons. And we were like, what in the hell are they doing? And they were like, well, you told us it was an evolutionary game. So what we did is we just started shooting the really dangerous aliens, and we let the stupid ones live a really long time. And they domesticated my friggin' aliens. They turned them into space cows. And so that's kind of a cool anecdote and a cool moment, right? In terms of, and we also nerfed that strategy, by the way. We took it out. Space cows a video game? I don't think so. But can I quantify that they learned a thing? No, but that was sort of an interesting observation. We're pissing off the creationists. So yay. They really got upset because we said, hey, here's an evolutionary video game and we want to, and they were like, well, you're your aliens didn't learn to play Mario Kart, therefore evolution is a lie. That was the thesis of this particular article. So, I mean, so there's a thing, there's a sort of an example of outreach in quotation marks. But I think what I've learned is that we have to think more broadly about the impacts that what we're doing actually has. I mean, I like this picture a lot because 3 years ago at Evo, there's Landon on the left explaining his phylogeny of alien morphologies to Joe Felsenstein. And there's Sam Heck explaining her model of quantitative trait evolution in her video game to Steve Arnold. I mean, that's pretty freaking cool. You can ask some questions about why that is if you don't know. And like the broader impacts that we're having in terms of the student developers and things like that, I think are really pretty unique and exciting. We do a lot of outreach. We've gone to the National, Science and Engineering Festival and things like that. And thousands of kids, right? Like you got video games and virtual reality and stuff like that. And we multiplied the attendance of the Society for the Study of Evolution booth at the National Science and Engineering Festival by at least an order of magnitude. Because people are like, I want to do that. And you end up, the kids shooting stuff and having a good time. That badge, by the way, this is a kid from a private Christian school, right? We're chatting with their parents about the evolution of influenza and things like that. So there's these engagement opportunities that we manage to get that are I think really valuable, but hard to measure in terms of educational impact. By the way, what that kid was doing was this is one of our undergrads, Shaylin, and she's shooting colored antibodies at a model of influenza. In a second, the flu season will change and she's not vaccinated, and so the antibodies won't stick anymore and destroy, right? And so we use this as a context to talk to parents and kids about, there's her epithelial cell wall, right? About why evolution matters in their daily lives. So, and we get to do really fun stuff. So we got to go to BioWare. Terry gave a seminar at BioWare. Many of you don't know what BioWare is, and that's okay that you're not a nerd. We don't hate you because of that. But and he got to give a seminar at BioWare. The people who made like Mass Effect and Dragon Age and all this kind of stuff about what we do. And like there's these really cool intersections between what we're doing and like academic evolution science and like the game industry and things like that. And so that's where I want to kind of end. Is what I didn't talk about really at all is one of the really fun things that we're doing now is all of this stuff that Landon can do and the other students can do in terms of game engine stuff. We're collaborating with people on their science. And so this is a paper that Bernadette out of Adam Jones's lab published, where Landon made a digital killifish and can modify the fin size and color and all of that kind of stuff. And then Bernadette went in and played these videos in a really nicely structured experimental context to test whether yellow colored females preferred yellow colored males or red colored males. And oh, by the way, they didn't have red colored males. So Landon made them some. And so what you're seeing is top left, that's the yellow one, bottom right, that's the red one. The animation loop is the same. The control conditions are nothing, obviously, in the top right, or just a generic shape, not a fish doing the exact same movement pattern. And, she published a paper that showed that the yellow females have a preference for the yellow males. And I could do a whole talk on all of the stuff that we've done related to the intersection between game development and science for many of you who are listening to this seminar. And so I give us sort of a mixed, like, did anybody learn anything useful? I think so. Can I measure it? No, that's not very easy. So anyway, that's sort of my nerdy story of what we've been up to in the game studio. I think this is a super horrible, incomplete list of our funding sources and participants and things like that. Like, I don't think Ari, for example, is on here, and so I put a bunch of other people I forgot to list because it's getting to the point where unless the project's in the talk, I can't remember, who to list. So, and with that, Darwin dancing around, thanks you, and I'll of course take questions from the chat or otherwise. I'm looking at the chat now. Okay, so no questions, I guess. Have you tried using AI players? What's next? Okay, so yeah, actually, a lot of the Darwin's Demons experiments we've done were AI players. The Project Castor stuff, we decided like on basic strategies that the human players would use, but their interpretation was theirs. And then if you saw Kristen's talk, which I didn't cover that at all, right? Where she's doing the mate choice stuff with our latest game. Landon has written several different AI players to use for those experiments. So it's a mix. What's next? I didn't talk at all about what we're funded to do right now is about vector-borne disease, like the ticks and Lyme disease and stuff like that. Again, like I don't have enough time to show all the things, so that's what we're working right now. Do you play Overwatch? No. Here's the thing. I'm super nerdy, love video games. I hate people. Not all of you, of course. You're all great, but I do not want to interact with other people on the internet. I don't want to play against them. Hearthstone's great because it's just cards and you can't really say anything to anybody. So no, I don't. Can you increase population size? Yes, to an extent. Eventually, if we increase it too big, there's like massive performance hits. So that's the tension that we are navigating. Can we vary it enough to matter? Well, we can go to like ridiculous small, from ridiculous small to small, but we haven't yet put something together where we can get up into the sort of thousands or tens of thousands. You have ideas to assess learning? Yes, we were just starting to collaborate with Tanya and others in the College of Education to get instruments together about like science and attitudes and evolution and biology and genetics, and then go into schools and actually do some studies, and then COVID blew everything up. So do the same cheats that work for Space Invaders. You've not mastered Space Invaders, Richard. Also work for Darwin's Demons. I don't know what those cheats are. So I'm going to go ahead and say no. I don't know that answer to that. Yeah, I don't know. All right. Any other? Oh wait. Are you going to make a SARS-CoV-2 game? We talked about a lot of different kinds of things. If anything, SARS-CoV-2 has highlighted the need for sort of digital things that teachers could use or students could use in an informal setting. It's also highlighted massive technology gaps and inequalities that we worry about a lot. I think the digital map that Landon has made, that I'll show people another time, about like shows, paths of transmission across a map like the United States. I think that would be cool to put into sort of a infectious disease spreading kind of a thing, but I'm open to suggestions on SARS-CoV-2 games, but feels a little too close to home right now. So, yeah. I'm seeing applause. I'm not seeing more questions. We're getting close to time to quit. So I'll give 10 more seconds. If another question shows up, I'll answer it. Other than that, we'll call it good. So the one last thing I'll say, so we'll say the question period is over, is like, we've collaborated on prototypes and stuff with lots of people, you know, with Marty and we did the thing for Scott's lab and you know, lots of other things, and we enjoy doing that. And if you have ideas that sort of fit in terms of collaboration, and Christine in terms of snail trails, and then, you know, the reason the game studio is down in IRIC is so that, you know, like it's a nucleator for crazy ideas. And so if you've got crazy ideas, we definitely want to hear you out. You just gotta get in touch with Terry or me or Landon or whatever you want to do, and we can talk about fun things. So, okay, well, thanks everybody for indulging the nerdiness for an hour. And if you want to follow up with anything, please do reach out.